At my promotion celebration, my parents said, "You owe the family, so your bonus belongs to us." My boss laughed and said, "That's funny, because she just got another raise." Their faces turned pale when he announced. I never thought my own parents would try to rob me. But looking back, I should have seen it coming. Let me start from the beginning. I grew up in a family where sacrifice was the magic word. Not my parents' sacrifices, no, that was all on me. See, they had this belief that children owed their parents for being born. They never said it outright, but every time I did something good, aced a test, got an award, even just got a part-time job in high school, the response was always, "Good." Now, how does that help the family? Money I earned? Straight into their hands. Free time? Didn't exist. I had to run errands, take care of my younger siblings, and basically be a third parent. And any time I pushed back, the guilt trips came out in full force. I was ungrateful. Selfish. Didn't I know how much they sacrificed for me? It wasn't like we were poor. My dad had a decent job, and my mom worked part-time, but they lived beyond their means. Expensive clothes, new gadgets, takeout several times a week, but somehow, there was never enough for school supplies or doctor visits unless I paid for them. I learned early on that arguing was useless. So I kept my head down, studied hard, and made a plan: get the hell out. And I did. The moment I got a full scholarship to a university across the country, I took it. My parents fought me on it, tried to convince me to go somewhere local, so I could help out, translation, keep being their personal ATM and babysitter. I refused. They threw a fit, said I was abandoning them. I left anyway. College was the first time I really felt free. I worked part-time, saved every penny, and didn't tell my parents anything about my finances. They still tried to demand money, but it was harder from a distance. And when I got my degree and landed a high-paying job in the city, I thought I was finally done with their nonsense. I was wrong. The promotion celebration fast-forward a few years. I'd worked my ass off at my job, and it paid off. I got promoted to a senior position, with a hefty salary bump and a massive year-end bonus. My boss, Mark, was a no-nonsense guy who valued hard work, and he personally congratulated me. It felt good. My co-workers planned a small celebration at a nice restaurant, and for some reason, I made the mistake of telling my mom about it. Of course, she invited herself. And my dad. And my 2 younger siblings. I should have said no, but a small part of me, the one that still wanted their approval, thought, maybe this time, they'll be proud of me. So, they showed up. My parents didn't congratulate me. They barely acknowledged my achievement. Instead, they acted like they were the guests of honor, ordering expensive drinks and food, laughing loudly, treating my coworkers like their guests. And then, right in the middle of the dinner, my mom put down her glass, smiled, and said, "Well, this is wonderful. Since you owe the family for all we've done for you, we'll take that bonus off your hands." Just like that. Like it was a given. Like my hard-earned money was theirs. I blinked, thinking I misheard her. What? My dad nodded like this was the most natural thing in the world. "Yeah, you know how much we've supported you. It's time to give back." Supported me? They drained me dry for years. I opened my mouth to argue, but my mom cut me off. "Don't be selfish," she said, her voice sharp. "This is what family does. We take care of each other. And right now, we need it more than you do." The entitlement in her tone made my blood boil. But before I could say a word, my boss, who had been quietly watching this train wreck unfold, let out a sharp laugh. "That's funny," Mark said, swirling his drink. "Because she just got another raise." Silence. My parents froze. My mom's fake smile twitched. Mark turned to me and said, "I was going to tell you tomorrow, but might as well do it now. You're getting an additional salary bump, effective immediately." The look on my parents' faces was priceless. Their smiles vanished, replaced by something between shock and panic. And then, Mark wasn't done. He leaned forward, smirking slightly, and said, "Oh, and just so we're clear, our company has very strict policies against financial abuse. If anyone is pressuring you for money, you let me know." My parents paled. My mom let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, we're just joking." "No, you weren't," Mark said, still smiling. But his eyes? Ice cold. My dad coughed, suddenly very interested in his drink. My mom's hands tightened around her fork. I could have let it go. But I was done being their doormat. So I took a sip of my wine, looked my mother in the eye, and said, actually, since we're talking about debts, I think it's time we settled ours. And that's when the real chaos began. I had spent years letting my parents walk all over me. Taking my money. Taking my time. Taking everything I worked for. But at that moment, sitting at that fancy restaurant, my boss watching, my coworkers whispering, I realized something: they had no power over me anymore. So, I decided to take my shot. Dropping the bomb, I set my wine glass down, leaned back, and gave my mother a calm, almost amused look. Since we're talking about debts, let's settle ours. The color drained from her face. What do you mean? I shrugged. Well, let's see. All the money I earned as a teenager. You took it. Every family emergency where I had to send money. Never saw a cent back. And college? I did that alone. So if we're talking about who owes who, I let my voice trail off, raising an eyebrow. My dad scowled. That was different. We're your parents. We took care of you. I scoffed. Took care of me? You used me. My mom's eyes darted around the table. She must have realized people were listening, because she forced a smile and said, "Oh, sweetheart, this isn't the place to talk about." I cut her off. Why not? You had no problem bringing up my bonus in front of my coworkers. Mark, my boss, chuckled into his drink. I could tell he was enjoying this way more than he should be. At this point, my younger siblings were frozen in their seats, wide-eyed. I felt bad for them, but they weren't my responsibility. Not anymore. My mother's voice dropped into a harsh whisper. You're embarrassing us. I smiled. Am I? Or are you just mad you can't manipulate me anymore? Her face twisted, but before she could snap back, Mark leaned in. Actually, I'm curious. How much did she owe you? The whole table went silent. My dad's jaw clenched. This is a family matter. Mark just nodded, sipping his drink. Right. That's what I thought. He turned to me. I hope you don't feel obligated to give them anything. I smirked. Oh, don't worry. I don't. And then, for the first time in my life, I saw fear in my parents' eyes. Because they knew. They knew I was done. The aftermath begins. The dinner ended on the most awkward note imaginable. My parents barely spoke after that, though my mother tried to save face with some fake laughs and forced conversation. My siblings stayed quiet, and my boss. He paid for my meal before I could even reach for my wallet. Consider it a celebration gift, he said with a wink. After dinner, I barely made it to my car before my phone exploded with texts from my mother. Mom, that was completely unnecessary. Mom, we are your family. You wouldn't be where you are without us. Mom, your father is furious. You embarrassed him. Mom, how could you do this? And then, the real threat, Mom, if you turn your back on us, don't expect us to be there when you need us. I stared at my screen, then let out a short laugh. When had they ever been there for me? I blocked her number. Then, I did something I should have done years ago. I pulled out my banking app and changed everything. New passwords, new security questions, two-factor authentication. I even put fraud alerts on my accounts, just in case. Because if I knew my parents, they weren't going to let this go. And I was right. The retaliation: the next morning, I woke up to emails from my bank. Someone had tried to access my account. Twice. I checked the login attempts. They were from my hometown. I exhaled slowly. Unbelievable. My parents had my old banking info from when I was younger. They must have assumed I was still dumb enough to use the same passwords. I wasn't. I immediately called my bank, reported the attempts, and locked everything down even further. Then, for good measure, I texted my mother one last time. Me, nice try. Hope it was worth it. She read it instantly. No reply. But I knew she got the message. The final blow: I thought that was the end of it. I really did. But my parents had one last trick up their sleeve. A week later, I got a call from my landlord. You're moving out? He asked. I blinked. What? He sighed. Your parents called. They said you were breaking your lease and moving back home. They even tried to get the paperwork started. I swear, my vision went red. They were trying to force me back. I took a deep breath, then calmly said, do not, under any circumstances, listen to them. I am not moving out. They are not on my lease. If they contact you again, let me know. My landlord was chill about it. Figured it was something like that. Just wanted to confirm. After hanging up, I knew I had to end this. They wanted war? Fine. I'd give them war. I thought my parents trying to steal from my bank account and faking my lease termination was rock bottom for them. I was wrong. They weren't done. Because a few days later, I got a call from HR. And that's when things took a turn I never saw coming. The accusation I was at work, having a normal morning, when my HR rep, Kelly, called me into her office. She looked serious. Too serious. The second I sat down, she folded her hands and said, "We received a complaint about you." My stomach dropped. A complaint? From who? Kelly sighed. We can't disclose that. But the allegations are serious. They claim you've been, she checked the report, stealing from the company, committing fraud, and engaging in unethical behavior. I stared at her. What? That's insane. Kelly gave me a knowing look. I figured as much, but we have to take these things seriously. I was still trying to process this when she continued, they sent us an email with evidence. Bank statements, screenshots, even a recording. I felt my hands go cold. Bank statements? No. No, no, no. I knew who was behind this. My parents. They had my old banking info. They probably took old statements from when I used to send them money and edited them to make it look like I was embezzling from work. The recording, though? That was new. Kelly clicked a file and played a distorted voice message. "Hello, I work with, company name, and I have information about, my name. She has been stealing money from accounts. I have proof. You should investigate before it's too late." My head was spinning. The voice was fake, either AI generated or someone disguising their voice. But I could feel my parents' fingerprints all over this. They weren't just trying to ruin my finances. They were trying to destroy my career. I took a deep breath. Kelly, I swear to you, this is a lie. I don't know who sent that, but I can guess. She leaned back, arms crossed. Go on. So I told her everything. The manipulation. The entitlement. The bank account attempts. The fake lease termination. By the time I was done, she let out a low whistle. Damn. That's next level. I nodded. Yeah. And I can prove it. The investigation turns against them. I worked in finance. If there was one thing I knew, it was how to track transactions. I pulled up my bank records, showing that the transactions they claimed were fraud were actually payments I sent to my parents over the years. Every single one had a note, for groceries, helping with rent, mom's request, and some even matched text messages from my mother asking for money. Then I showed my emails from my landlord about their fake lease stunt. Kelly's eyes widened. This is, she trailed off, shaking her head. Okay. I need to escalate this. Do you mind if we bring in legal? I nodded. Do it. A few hours later, I was in a meeting with legal and security. They went through the evidence my parents sent and immediately found holes. The recording? AI generated. The bank statements? Sloppy Photoshop edits. The anonymous tipster's email? Traced back to my parents' home IP address. And that's when Mark, my boss, walked in, arms crossed, looking pissed. So, he said, throwing a folder onto the table, are we pressing charges, or do you want me to handle it? I blinked. Wait. Pressing charges? The legal team exchanged looks. Well, one of the lawyers said, this technically counts as defamation and fraud. They made false claims to damage your reputation and employment. If you wanted to pursue a case, we could. I just sat there, stunned. I had spent years letting my parents get away with things. I had let them guilt-trip me, use me, steal from me. But now? They had gone too far. I met Mark's gaze. What would you do? He smirked. Personally, I'd scare the hell out of them. I thought about it. Then I smiled. Let's do it. The trap. Instead of calling my parents immediately, we set a trap. Mark had connections. And within 24 hours, we had someone from corporate security call my parents, pretending to be an investigator. The fake investigator told them that they were looking into the fraud claims and needed more details. My mother, being the idiot she is, fell for it. She spilled everything. She admitted she was the one who made the complaint. She even said, she owes us, and we were just trying to teach her a lesson. We got the whole thing recorded. And then, just to twist the knife, Mark had the investigator casually mention, by the way, filing false reports like this is a serious crime. It could lead to a lawsuit. Even jail time. The panic in my mother's voice when she realized she was caught? Pure gold. The final blow. Once we had all the proof, I finally called my mother. The second she answered, she went off. How dare you set us up? Do you know what you've done? I let her scream. Then, when she finally ran out of steam, I said, did you really think I wouldn't fight back? Silence. I continued, you've stolen from me, tried to ruin my job, and lied about me. But guess what? It backfired. My dad suddenly got on the phone. Listen, we can fix this. We're family. I laughed. Actually laughed. Family? You mean the people who tried to get me fired? More silence. Then, I dropped the bomb. We have proof of what you did. And we're considering pressing charges. My mother made this high-pitched choking noise. You wouldn't. Wouldn't I? I said calmly. I let that sink in. Then, for the first time in my entire life, I had the upper hand. I ended with this, you are dead to me. Don't ever contact me again. And then I hung up. That I haven't spoken to my parents since. And for the first time in my life, I feel free. I should have known my parents wouldn't stop. After the stunt with my landlord, I realized something, they were never going to leave me alone. Not unless I made them. They had tried to steal from me, guilt-trip me, manipulate me, and now? They were straight up lying to force me back home. I wasn't just going to cut them off. I was going to make sure they regretted ever trying to mess with me. The final straw. A few days after the landlord incident, I got a text from my younger sister. Sister. Mom and Dad are telling everyone you abandoned us. Sister, they said you stole from the family and ran off. Sister, they're even telling Grandma you won't give them money for food. I felt a chill go through me. They were turning the whole family against me. I called my grandmother immediately. She picked up, her voice already sharp. I can't believe you, after everything they've done for you. I sighed. Grandma, how much did they ask you for? She hesitated. They needed help covering bills. They said you refused to support them. I laughed bitterly. Grandma, they tried to steal my bonus. Then they tried to get me kicked out of my apartment. Silence. Then, very quietly, she said, they didn't tell me that. Of course, they didn't. I told her everything. The stolen money from my childhood. The manipulation. The attempted bank fraud. The landlord stunt. By the time I finished, she was fuming. That ungrateful pair, she muttered. I'll handle this. And oh, she did. Burning the bridges. The next day, I woke up to chaos. Apparently, my grandmother had gone off on my parents. She called my aunts, uncles, and cousins, told them everything, and ripped into my parents for lying. My mother called me, screaming. How could you turn everyone against us? I stayed calm. I just told the truth. She was livid. She threw every insult she could think of, but I just listened, letting her dig her own grave. When she finally ran out of steam, I said, by the way, I spoke to a lawyer. Silence. I continued, I reported the attempted bank fraud. And I made sure the landlord knows if you try anything again, there will be legal consequences. Her breath hitched. You wouldn't. I already did. Then, for the first time in my entire life, my mother begged. Please, we didn't mean to. I hung up. Then I blocked both my parents. The final revenge. You'd think that would be enough. But I wanted to make sure they never pulled this on anyone else. So, I did a little digging. Turns out, my parents had taken out loans in my name when I was younger. Not a lot, but enough that they were hoping I'd never notice. Guess what? I noticed. I filed a fraud report, provided all the proof I could, and let the system do its thing. The bank launched an investigation, and within a few weeks, my parents got hit with criminal charges. Loan fraud. Attempted identity theft. They called me from a different number, begging me to drop the charges. I didn't answer. My grandmother and extended family cut them off. Turns out, my parents had been mooching off of everyone for years, not just me. With their reputations ruined, they had no one left to manipulate. The last I heard, they had to sell the house to cover their debts. They moved into a tiny apartment, still trying to scam people, but now? No one was falling for it. As for me? I thrived. I moved into a better apartment. I got another promotion a year later. And I used my bonus, not for my parents, not for their lies, but for myself. And I've never looked back. The best part? A while ago, my sister texted me again. Sister, Mom and Dad are struggling. They want to talk to you. I just replied, tell them I said, that's funny. And then I blocked her, too. Because I owe them nothing.